So for this step, I'm going to be looking at duplicating and aligning shapes in Illustrator. So we've already gone over creating shapes, and so now I want to talk about how to more easily duplicate and copy and paste and align shapes so that you're working with multiple objects that you can align to develop your op art inspired images. So I just started off with this triangle. I made it using the polygon tool and just making sure to click once in the canvas so I have it set to 3 sides. I have not been able to figure out any other way to access this dialog box. If any of you know, that would be amazing. So please email me. But yeah, after multiple attempts, I still have not figured this out. So anyway, okay. So I have this triangle, and I know that I want to make duplicates of this triangle, and I want to make exact copies. So first way to do this, that's the easiest, or not the easiest, but the one that's probably the most simple to explain, is to go up to edit and then go copy and then go back to edit and then say paste. And so this is a great time to start remembering these shortcuts. Hopefully this is something that is pretty universal across many different types of digital applications and computer-driven applications. So it's Command C and then Command V and then Command C and Command V. Oh yeah, and then once I know I'm only copying this one thing once, it's already on my clipboard, so I can just continue to paste many, many times and have all these different images. Okay, so that's definitely one way. But let's say I wanted to have these triangles up here in a line, and I didn't want to have to be dragging them every single time I copied and pasted one. And I also don't know, I have to keep track of how many times I hit paste. And so so that can be a little bit more of an arduous process. So I want to show a way to streamline that. So I'm going to delete all of these. And I'm going to select this one. And then while I have it selected, I'm going to hold down the Option key and make sure that you have this selection tool, that you're using the selection tool, that's what's selected in the toolbar. When I hold down the Option key, it allows me to, and then I drag from this triangle, it allows me to create these duplicates pretty much on the fly. So I'm not having to copy and paste anything. I'm able to just hold down the Option key and create these. And now if I then select numerous triangles, I can do the same thing. Hold down the Option key, drag from the objects that I have selected, and now it's letting me create many of these triangles. Okay, so that's definitely a much faster way than just going up to copy once and then hitting paste and then having to reposition things. So let's go from working with 20 of these objects to potentially 100 of these objects. So I'm going to, so I have, oh yeah, so this is a great time to talk about moving around on the canvas. So I'm trying to make these a little bit smaller, but I'm also wanting to zoom in on the artboard so that everyone can see what I'm doing. And I'm also wanting to move this around so people can see more what I'm doing and have it be more centered in their screen. And so as you're working in Illustrator, a couple of the tools that actually help you navigate the artboard and the canvas are the hand tool. So the hotcut key for this is H, and this allows you to move the canvas around without having to worry about moving any of your layers or accidentally moving your objects. And then also the zoom tool, which is right next to it, it's Z, and then that works similar to how it does in Photoshop. When you select it, you can zoom in. And then when you hold down Alt or Option, it allows you to zoom out. And then the shortcut keys for this are Command plus and then Command minus. And so this allows you to do this without having to select all these different tools, which can be really, really helpful. All right, so those are some ways to navigate. So those don't have any impact on what your canvas looks like or what your visuals are looking like. It only changes the way that you can see your screen and the amount of detail that you can see on some of these drawings. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit just so people can see the scale that I'm going to be trying to work with here. Okay, so I'm making this even smaller, and to make this transformation, I'm just using the selection tool to select the object and then using the bounding boxes. I'm holding down Shift to keep that object, the proportions right. Okay, and so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this. I'm going to hit Option, and I'm going to drag out. I'm also holding down Shift, and this is keeping these mostly in somewhat of a line, although maybe it's because I'm zoomed out so much and I have snapping on. So now that I have about 4 or 5 of these, I'm going to hold down Option after selecting all of them, and then get more, and now I'm going to do the same thing, and let's make this go to the end there. Okay, and so now I'm going to start going this way, this way, this way. So now I'm adding objects vertically, and then every time I do this, it's making this faster and faster. And so hopefully people are seeing how this can very quickly be much more streamlined than copying and pasting one at a time. So I've just been able to fill up almost this whole field with these triangles in a matter of a couple of minutes. So that's great. And this is definitely one way to expedite your projects and your exercises for this op art project. And another thing that I want to show within this specific tutorial is how you can start working with the alignment. And this goes back to what I was talking about in the introduction, where Bridget Riley was having to use grids and a grid system to show her as an outline or as a sketch to show how she was going to have to transform her objects in order to create these optical illusions. And so it's good to start with a somewhat even grid, because that way when you start to mess with that grid and when you start to create these different transformations and abstractions within that grid, it can help you understand how that is going to produce some kind of visual effect. So it's going to create the sense of depth or the sense of movement, and a lot of that is achieved by breaking up and slowly transforming a grid that our eye is seeing as even. So I'm not getting too much into the specifics and the technicals. I wanted to show you how you can use Illustrator and this digital tool to create these really specific alignments and not have to do it by your eye and not have to do it manually, and do it in a way that's automated, that's going to save you a lot of time and headaches. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to delete all of these triangles. I'm going to zoom in here, and now we're going to talk about the Align tool. So let's pretend that I didn't do such a good job of making these all on the same horizontal line when I was copying and pasting them or duplicating them. Okay, so the idea here is that I want each of these triangles to fit, to be equidistant from one another. I want all their bottoms and their tops to line up, and I want them to be pretty much centered or within a grid structure on this entire canvas here. So how do I do this? Okay, so Illustrator has an amazing process called Align that makes it very easy to work with these really specific measurements and to align objects to one another, and then also to the artboard or the canvas. So first, let's talk about aligning things to one another. So I'm going to select all of these, and once I have all these objects selected, you see it comes up here in this top toolbar or this top parameter bar that allows you to actually do the align process right from here. And if you're not seeing this, it might not be on versions CS6, then you can always go over here to this tab. Or if you're not seeing either of these things, then you can go up to Window and just make sure that you have Align somewhere there, and then it will pop up. So all of these icons are doing the same thing as pressing these icons up here. Okay, so the first thing that you want to make sure that you have selected, depending upon what you're trying to do, is you want to look over here and see what the align is set to. Is it set to align to the selection, which is the other objects that are selected, or is it set to align to the artboard? So default, I think it's supposed to be set to align to selection. That's what we want to do for this first step. And I just want to go through and show people what these different these different aligns do. So we can align the centers, we can align the right edges, we can align the tops, we can align the bottoms. And when I'm doing these, I'm actually just undoing because it's not what I'm trying to do for this particular example. So undo is another really important shortcut key to learn. It's undo align, or it'll just say undo whatever, or Command Z. And unlike Photoshop, Illustrator does not have a history, but it does have multiple undos. So I can go back many, many times. So that's multiple steps of undo. Just I'm hitting Command Z, and then I'm hitting Command Shift Z to redo, just so we get back to what we were doing. Okay. All right. So bottoms and tops, and then you also have this option, which is horizontally distribution and vertical distribution. And what that does is that doesn't align the objects to a particular level or side. What it does is that it says, okay, well, now we're going to make it so that each of these objects is equidistant from their centers, or from their left edges, or from their farthest most right edges. So if I were to click horizontal distribute center with these objects all selected, now you see that when I deselect them, they're each an equal distance apart. So this is almost exactly what I want to do for this overall project. The last thing I want to show is how you can use this to align things also to the artboard. So if I were to select all these, and then if I were to change the align process so that it aligns to the artboard, now what this is going to do is this isn't going to look at the objects to determine how it aligns things. It's going to look at the artboard. So if I say align to center, it's going to put that at the horizontal center. If I say vertical center, it's going to bring all those objects to that vertical center. So I know it only looks like there's one object here, but this is actually the stack of those multiple objects. But because I had them all selected, and then I did that process, it moved them all to the same spot. So I just undid. And then, so what I want to show for this is actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this one to the farthest left point of the artboard. And then I'm going to select this object on the right and then move this to or align this to the farthest right point. And now when I select all of these and then go up to the align option, change it to align selection again, and then I do the horizontal distribute, now they are all again have that equal distance between them, and that changed because I had moved these two objects on the end. So that distance is going to change a little bit, but also now this is lining up to what I know to be the boundaries of the canvas and the artboard. So I'm trying to create this field of this grid, and so that also involves the size of the artboard. Okay, so now I'm going to move these up so that they're, oh, I guess I could have, haha. I could do that by saying align to the top. All right, so now I know that this line of triangles is aligned to the top, and then the left and right sides of it are also aligned to the left and right sides of the canvas. So this is a great place for me to be in terms of developing this grid of shapes that I'm going to be ultimately trying to abstract and then use to create an optical illusion. So the next thing I want to show has to do with grouping and how to more easily align things and more easily control multiple objects as a group, and then also how you can use groups to strategically align things using the groups instead of all these different objects. So first, let me select all of these, and let's say I wanted to make 3 more rows of these. So I'm going to hold down Option and drag this one out, and then hold down Option and drag this one out. Okay, and then let's say I want to change the color of all these, so I'm going to select them again. I'm going to go up here, and I want that to be lighter, so I'm changing that K value, and then I'm going to select these, and I want those to be even lighter. So first I'm going to use this eyedropper tool, and that's going to allow me to, when I have that selected, and I have a group of shapes or a single object or shape that's selected, when I click that, it will then take whatever sample I'm clicking on and apply it to whatever object or objects I have selected. So that's a pretty handy little trick. And then I want to lighten that even further. Okay, so now I have these three different rows. But let's say I wanted to make it so that this row was vertically centered in accordance to this row and to this row. So how do I do that? Because if I select all of these and I hit vertical distribute center, I'm putting the wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable. Okay, that does something weird. Oh, and that's because I also had aligned artboard. But even when I have that, even when I have align to selection selected and I do that, okay, that does something weird. It's not what I was expecting. One way to do this would be to select each of these three in a column at once, and then select vertical distribute center, and then do that over and over again. But as you might imagine, that can become very monotonous. And so there is an easier way, and that is to start using groups. And so the way to create a group is first you select all the objects that you want to be in a group. So I'm doing that here with this top row. And then I'm going up to Objects and then Group. Command G is the shortcut key, very useful. And now that I have made this into a group, as you can see, I can just click any of the objects or any of the shapes within that group, and the group is selected. And then I just click outside of that group in order to deselect it. And now when I move this around, I don't have to continuously draw this selection. So I can also, with the group selected, I can also change the value of the whole group. And this is just subtracting the step of having to, or removing the step of having to continuously draw that selection and select all those objects. So I'm going to do that with all three of these. So I'm going to Command G and Control G if you're on a Windows machine, Command G or Control G. So now these are all groups. And so now when I select these three and go up to here to vertically distribute them, instead of it vertically distributing each of the objects independently, Illustrator views a group as a single object. So when I do this now, I'm able to distribute just the group, and the row is being seen as a group, instead of having to try and finesse and manually distribute each one of these different columns. So hopefully that's one big time-saving thing that's going to help. Okay, so, and you can also use other align operations the same way. So if I have these two selected, and I can just hit that left align and it'll bring it to the left-hand side. So let me duplicate this a couple times. Make some triforces here. Okay, so the last thing that I want to show while we're working with these groups is how you can ungroup things, and then how you can also use groups as a way of isolating all the objects within a group to more easily edit them. So to ungroup something, you select it as a group and go up to Ungroup, or it's Command-Shift-G, and then that will allow you to independently move around each of these different objects. However, if you're wanting to move around some of these objects, but you're not wanting to have to ungroup them, then one way to do that is to double-click on the group, and then it brings you into this window where suddenly you see it says Group, and then Layer, and then everything that isn't in that group is a little bit grayed out, and you realize that you can't really edit any of those things, but you can move around these different elements within this group. And you can change these all independently of one another and move them and do transforms. Anything that you can do normally in Illustrator with individual objects, you can do in this isolation mode. And then what's great about it is that you can still see what's around this object or the other visual components of this image, but you don't have to worry about accidentally editing them. You're only editing whatever is within this group. So when you're working with multiple groups or many, many objects, this can be a really useful tool. So the way to get out of this mode is just hit Escape, and then when you go back and select this group, you see now that group has changed significantly because of the edits that you made when you were in isolation mode. Okay, so I think that is, oh yeah, and then just the one last thing about the properties and values that are assigned to groups. Groups don't have to be made of all similar objects. They can be totally different. As you see with this row, these are all the duplicated objects. They're all one color. When I select that group, this one color comes up, and then I can sit here and apply all the changes, and those are going to apply to the entire group. However, this group has different objects in it, or different values assigned to these different objects. And so for this, I'm getting that question mark. So if I wanted to edit these specifically or independently, I could double click and then I could go in and just change these back, or decide to change every other one. I'm doing this by holding down Shift. And then I can escape, and then it still is being seen as a group, however. And if I ever wanted to just make it so that all of the values within a group are consistent, all I have to do is go up to that color and then assign another value to it, and then it'll assign all of the objects and all the shapes within that group the same value. So it's not going to change things like transformations, but it is going to change things like properties or of the fill, or I can add a stroke to it, and it'll apply that type of thing consistently. All right, so that's it for groups and working with multiples. And make sure to save your image just so that you're getting in the habit of doing that. And then you might want to be using some of these elements for your inspiration image, which I'm going to be bringing into the next step.